Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Strength and Speed owner and Conquer the Gauntlet Pro, Evan Preparis. Got a guest with me on the line today, as usual. Before we get to him, though, a quick word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Compex. Compex makes those electrical muscle stimulators. You may have seen me using some of my Instagram stories or on my Instagram page or Facebook. And they came out with a wireless one, which is really good because then you don't have all the wires hanging off. My favorite use for it so far has been back in early 2018, I had injured my foot, so I couldn't run for a little while. And I was actually, instead of getting up every morning to run, I was actually using the electrical muscle stimulator to keep my legs in good running shape, even though I wasn't able to run. And then they also have the Compex Fix, the massage gun that they came out with. And I think they just actually released a bunch of new tips for it. So if you want, different massage settings, you can check that out. And it's on the less expensive side compared to other ones. The EMS device, the muscle stimulator one, is on the more expensive side. So anyone looking for a good Christmas present for your athlete in your life, I think you can hit up one of those, and that pretty much handles all your Christmas shopping in one single move. All right, let's bring on today's guest. Joining me again, I have JRen Renyer. Jared is the owner of JRen Fitness. He's a obstacle course racer also, and also a strength athlete. And he's also a strength and conditioning coach, a contractor for the United States Army. So, Jared, welcome back to the show.
Good to be back.
Yeah. So we got a couple of topics we want to talk about today. We're actually recording on Veterans Day, so this won't be released for a hot minute. But Jared is a veteran, so, again, thank you for your service, Jared.
Thank you. Also to you.
Yeah. So we got three topics we want to talk about. One, probably it was it must have been 2 years ago. You came over my house and you were doing a study, I believe for your master's, where we were talking about the science of moving across a rig and, how the force is distributed and, how long you're hanging from each hand when swinging, stuff like that. So we're going to talk through his paper on that. We're going to talk through altitude training. Specifically, I'm going to say part of World's Toughest Mudder, the virtual World's Toughest Mudder at altitude this past weekend. Did not go super well, but we'll get into that. So we're going to go over kind of the physiology of what's actually happening in your body. And then finally, because Veterans Day and we're both Army veterans, the Army has finally switched their PT test after, I don't know, it's got to be, we got to be over 20 years. We haven't changed. 40 years? Damn. Yeah. So I know about 20 years ago, they did adjust the standards so that it was the same test, but the standards shifted slightly. But now it's a completely different test, and we'll jump into that. So Jared, why don't you start off with the science of moving across a rig and kind of what you did when you came over my house and took those pictures and video and what we learned.
Yeah. It was 2 years ago. It was for, like I said, for my master's program in kinesiology class. And what we did was took kind of your body angles through moving through the rig. From the second ring to the third ring is really what we measured here, just because after the first ring is a little bit different because you're starting from a fixed point. And then anything after that, that once you're in the middle, that's just going to be repeated itself. But kind of took your body angle. And then also with you doing the two-handed grip, we did the amount of time that you were on one hand versus two hands. And for you, basically, when we were talking about it, with your interest being in endurance and the longer, insane length races, how that extrapolates out over, 12, 24 hours, things like that. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Keep going. Yeah. What did we learn from it? What were the takeaways from, and when he's saying the two-handed grip, what I do is I move sideways across the rig typically. So every ring hold, I match hands. So both hands are gripping each ring before I move on to the next one versus more of like a monkey swing where you're kind of hanging from one arm and there's a lot of rotation. And I do that. So my left shoulder, I had heard it on some military training. I think I might have ripped something on the inside. I'm not 100% sure, but my left shoulder I don't like hanging from my left hand, single arm. So I always do double-handed, and I find it not only has more control, but I can do it for longer in endurance obstacle course racing. And then on top of that, when the obstacle gets wet, having two hands on it and opposing grips, it creates tension. So I feel like I just have a much better control, and I'm much faster if I go that way. So, what did we learn?
So basically, from first ring or from second ring to the third ring, took you at that time about 2.3 seconds, and not about. We use this really cool program called Canovia. It's free. If you want to videotape yourself and then break it down, you can do timestamps and a whole bunch of stuff with it. But took you 2.3 seconds from one ring to the other. With that total amount, you were on one arm for 0.76 seconds. So less than 1 second is your amount of time out of that whole 2.3. And that is still split between both your right and your left arm once as you are letting go from the second ring to the time you grab a hold of the third ring. And then also as you, I think on a couple of them, you had to kind of regenerate your momentum a little bit. So you weren't just like swing, catch, swing, release, swing, release. And then once you had released that second hand to the time that it grasped the that third ring as well. So that point, like I said, that 0.76 seconds is split between both arms on that one. So that's just under a third of the total time that you were on one arm. And then, extrapolate that out to 24 hours. If you are someone who can do what I'd call like the monkey swing or the ape swing, like someone who does it really, really well is Jacob Stone. He's got those long arms. He can just sit there and hang and swing between rings and skip rings and stuff like that. But that fatigue will build up. So you tend to kind of save your grip that way as well. And also one thing that we didn't talk about, but I was just thinking about when I was doing the paper, was that you take someone that has longer limbs, you are putting a longer lever on that, and the body, their torso and their legs and everything else are going to be further away from that fulcrum. So where that ring is pivoting at the top, there's going to be a longer lever. So when they swing down to the bottom of that, when they're at, the very bottom of that swing before they start to swing back up, they're going to have more weight and force pushing down on their grip and creating more fatigue just because that's a longer lever. It's going to be a longer swing time because it's taking longer to complete that. Because as you and most other people who go through sideways tend to kind of be in that still lock off position, or they aren't fully extending their arms. So you're on a shorter lever, not creating as much force or swing at the bottom. So like a good way to explain that is like, I guess just when you're at the bottom of a swing on the playground and you go up really high and then you kind of wait to the bottom, you feel a little bit heavier at the bottom as you do at the top or the front or the back. That's going to be that kind of same thing there. You just have a much longer lever that you're putting force through as well.
Yeah, that was really cool. And, it's cool to see science back up what kind of I have found out just through trial and error. It's cool to see that. And then on top of that, you mentioned 0.76 seconds. And like I said, I'm not good at hanging from one arm. It hurts my shoulder a little bit. And I couldn't believe how little I was hanging from one arm. When you actually do the timestamps, it was like 0.76. I mean, that's nothing, right? Which explains why I can do that movement, and pass like at World's Toughest Mudder when they have obstacles with just rings. Like I can go, I had 100% obstacle completion 1 year, though one of the years they had Kongs, just because.
Right.
Yeah, because that's what I was doing every lap, and it was just no problem.
Right.
So
yeah, and the one part that makes it kind of nice is also with that is you are transitioning your hands when you are you're not letting go of both hands until you are near or at the top of that forward swing, and you're not letting go of that backhand until you're near or at the top of that backswing. So you're only like the amount of time that you are on one hand, you're also weighing the least amount, if that makes sense. Like your release and catch point is so close to the top, both front and back of your swing. You're never really having your full body weight, or let alone full body weight plus the momentum of the swing down at the bottom on that one arm. You're like, cool, I'm really weightless here at the top. Let go, grab, swing. I'm weightless again. Release, grab, and then you kind of start your next swing phase for the next hold. So Yeah, that was fun to dissect.
Yeah, that's again super cool, and I hope people are mentally grasping what you mean by that. I'm not sure how to explain it any better, but
Right.
yeah, it's like at the top of a swing. For a second, you're not moving, right? You're not falling, you're not rising, so
Right.
you're weightless kind of for a second, and
You're changing directions essentially.
yeah, and that's where I'm transitioning according to
Yep.
your study. Which
Yep.
again, I I I don't realize that it's just what inherently feels comfortable, and I think that's just a result of practice, right? I've just done it enough times where that's what feels comfortable because that's through trial and error that's inherently what's easiest for me.
Yeah, our brains are really good at finding out what's the easiest and getting really good at that.
Yeah. Awesome. Any final thoughts on that study that we should share with people?
I don't think so. Not without going way too more into the weeds and getting super sciencey with it.
Cool. So let's jump forward now to topic 2. So we're talking in altitude. So kind of bring everyone up to speed. Virtual World's Toughest Mudder was a virtual event this year. So basically, you run 5 miles, you do some sort of obstacle for virtual toughest mudders. Their obstacles have been, I'm going to use the term kind of nonsense. They've been kind of like really weird stuff. Not always like physical events. Sometimes it's like balancing, and sometimes it's just doing squats in the water and stacking up plastic cups using chopsticks, all sorts of weird stuff. So I had to work during World's Toughest Mudder like I do every year, but because it wasn't a live event, I did not ask for off, and I was like, I'll just run virtual World's Toughest Mudder from my hotel. Only problem was my hotel is in Colorado Springs, so we're at 6,000 feet near the. I'm actually right by National Strength and Conditioning Association, their headquarters. Like I'm literally like less than a quarter mile from the building my hotel is, which is kind of fun, and the
Nice.
Olympic Training Center. And so plan was to do virtual toughest there, and I knew the altitude would affect me. Wasn't exactly sure how much it would affect me, but I started running, and I view virtual events as more than training, but not the equivalent of a race, right? So this is the final event of the year, so my plan was to take it seriously and try my best. And I started running. I noticed my heart rate was a little bit higher than normal. And then around mile 15, started feeling a little lightheaded. It was like kind of some dry sweats there, feeling a little dizzy. I was like, all right, power through it. And then at mile, I took a couple of walk breaks before mile 25, which I was like, well, that's never happened before. That's weird, whatever. And then I finished mile 25 and I started vomiting. And then, it being a virtual event, I was like, I pushed myself probably about 10 miles further than I would if it was a training run. And I'm not going to push myself to the point if it was a real race, right? If it was a real race, I would have stopped vomiting, obviously, cooled off, relaxed, and gone back out there, and even if I just had to walk for the next 20 hours or whatever it was left. And so that was the end of my virtual race and end of my season. Kind of lame, not super. I mean, I'm not upset with it, but it was just like a really lame ending to 2020. But I guess that's kind of like the theme for a lot of people. So I want Jared's going to explain to us, what's kind of going on with your body when you're at altitude. And 2, I'm going to share what knowing what I know about altitude and knowing how I felt, kind of what I thought was going on in my body in hindsight. So, Jared, what happens when I take someone from sea level, stick them up at altitude and tell them to start exercising?
They have a hard time. Plain and simple. But, like we all know, the air is thinner up there. There's less oxygen, yada, yada. There's actually not less oxygen.
I was about to correct you. Good answer.
Yeah, right. So like you're going to catch me on, the concentration of oxygen and everything that the air is made up of is the same. But what happens is because there's just less atmospheric pressure. That's why if you go to like the MLB team, if you go to the Rockies stadium, there are more home runs hit in that stadium than anywhere else in the league. Don't quote me on that, but I know like it's something close to there. But because the air is thinner, there's less friction with the air, yada, yada. That also happens because there's less atmospheric pressure. So all of that air has a weight to it, so to speak. Similarly, is if like you go deeper down underwater, you feel more of that weight of the water pushing on you. That's, in a nutshell, an oversimplified, that's how your lungs work. More of that air or that pressure is pushing that oxygen and just that air into your lungs, pushing that oxygen into your blood. When you go up higher, you have less pressure. Your lungs are not absorbing that nearly as much because, like I said, there's less pressure. You have to become acclimatized to that. Your body creates more alveoli, which are the little sacs in your lungs that absorb all that oxygen. So that's why they like to say at least 2 weeks, you're not going to create the number of alveoli that you need, but your body is going to at least adapt a little bit to that smaller percentage of oxygen that it's absorbing, not that's actually in the air. And so then, like you found out, because your body's not taking in as much oxygen, when you try to do the same amount of work, you're basically increasing your intensity. Like you're almost working at you go from what would be a normal for you, Evan, like a cardio paced jog. Now that's more like you trying to run like a 400 or an 800 pace. Now you're doing that for 15 miles, and then and extrapolate that out, it gets exponentially worse the longer you go. Even for someone who's in, great shape and used to running forever.
Yeah. So I started running, and I started running for the event, and I was like, it feels pretty normal. But when I looked back at my heart rate data, my heart rate was so high, right? One of the laps it said like I'm running a 10-minute per mile pace. And my heart rate was at 160, which is a little bit higher than normal. But it also, like its highest reading during that 5-mile segment was 190. My heart rate I've never even seen my heart rate that high. Like I've never seen it. I've never, I think my highest I've ever seen on my watch is like 185. And that was like running up the mountain in Blue Mountain, Canada. Right. Mm-hmm. And the course I'm on is 131 feet of elevation gain, which is flat. Right.
Right.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I'm understanding, right? So I'm breathing in and I'm getting less oxygen. Because I'm getting less oxygen, my heart rate is going to increase because it's trying to get more oxygen into the blood. And I think also because I'm getting less oxygen, instead of my muscles using primarily aerobic mechanisms to generate energy, I think I was using anaerobic energy too, which is why my legs started hurting sooner than they normally do, like significantly sooner.
Yep. Yeah. Because for those people out there who are familiar with heart rate training, those zones are a thing. And as soon as you pass into those higher zones, like even if you are trained, like Evan, like you'd found like that 160 average, if you're used to, like, what do you normally run at? Like 145, 150 ish lower?
Yeah. Well, like low 150s.
Low 150s. So so you're automatically, so if you're at low 150s, let's call it 150 for easy math. If let's say you were up at 165 for part of that and you just kind of average that 160, that's automatically 10% higher just working at that 10-minute pace than you would have been normally. So, like just there, you're like you said, your heart rate is like no longer in that aerobic zone, and more of that anaerobic or glycolytic work is happening, buildup of lactate in the muscle. And like you said, the muscles are working harder because they don't have oxygen, or because they're not getting as much oxygen pumped in there. Heart is having to work harder because, again, like you said, the blood is not absorbing the oxygen, therefore the muscles aren't getting it, and it's just this cascading effect.
Yeah, so normally when I'm running these ultra OCRs, these long ones, right? I'm in like zone 2 and zone 3. For those of you who know heart rate zones, my watch was showing 4 for like almost, and I didn't realize that at the time. It was after I stopped and I finished vomiting. I looked back and actually looked at my heart rate zones, and I was like, oh my goodness, my heart rate looked like I was running the Army 10 miler, which is like when I run the Army 10 miler, I go like all out and I run like 6-minute miles for 10 miles. And that's what it looked like. And I was doing like 8:30s and 9-minute miles as part of World's Toughest Mudder, virtual World's Toughest. So, I'd say the other thing was it felt like because my muscles are working so much harder, it felt like the liquid calories I was drinking, right? I was drinking Heat and Perpetuum. it felt like that was just sitting in my stomach. Like my body wasn't
Oh yeah.
absorbing that liquid. And it was just
Right.
like, because all the blood felt like it was going to the muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was also one of the causes that maybe, I kept putting liquid in because I'm drinking and I'm thirsty and I'm sweating and the air is dry. So my sweat's evaporating. And it just felt like I had a big gut bomb of liquid in my stomach. And then I started throwing up. So
Yeah, and that's another thing that, like I said, when you're able to stay at that lower heart rate, for you normally isn't a big deal, because liquid, that's, as you have your fueling down pat now.
yeah,
But
I've never thrown up during a race ever.
right, liquid much easier to digest than hard food or than solid food. But again, like when you're working out at lower intensities, what happens is what we call a blood battle. Like if you eat and work out, or eat right before working out, your body wants to do two things. It wants to supply blood and oxygen for the working muscles during the exercise, but it also wants to digest that food and get it in and out, or in and process through the gut, to also just to do its job. Um, and you're working at the lower levels, not that big of a deal, because you're not taxing that system of fueling the muscles nearly as much. But as you found out, heart rate increases, it's having to pump more blood to the muscles, less of that blood goes to the gut, and the body makes the command decision to be like, all right, one of you's got to go. I can't ditch quads or hamstring right now, so out goes the perpetuum.
Yeah. So, and the ease of digestion is why I recommend using liquid fuel for all ultra OCRs. And that's why, Muttering Guides, my book, Muttering Guides Ultra OCR Bible, that's why I push for liquid fuels, that ease of digestion. And normally it works fine. Just I was really surprised at the altitude, how much it affected me. I was legitimately not, I was expecting to run slower and I was expecting it to be a little bit harder, but I just didn't. I was a little bit shocked by it. Yeah.
Yeah. When I saw your post, I was also surprised by that. I expected you to about the same way. I didn't know you're over there, but once you said that, on your post you're running in Colorado, I was like, okay, he should, like, it's gonna be slower, but
Yeah.
nothing horrible. But apparently it was.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't view virtual races as real races. So I didn't push myself to the point where I would normally push myself during a race, right? Like
Right.
in a real race, I'm going past the point I vomit. I'm going to go until it, like, I physically can't move anymore. And,
Right.
With Virtual World's Toughest, I essentially, the area I'm running in, I had to cross several streets that were fairly busy. So I wasn't really looking forward to that at night. And then the area I was running in, I basically would run out about 1.75 miles. And then there was like a trail. And if I took a right on the trail, it kind of went through like a park. If I took a left, I went past about 8 different homeless camps.
Oh, nice.
So, and there was during the day, there was some homeless people on my route. And I was a little concerned. I was legitimately a little concerned because, you run past a homeless person, fine. But if I'm running past a homeless person every hour on the hour for 24 hours and, I progressively look worse and worse, like all it takes is one guy to be like, you know what, I'm going to take that guy's phone. He looks like dog crap, and
Right.
so I was kind of a little concerned about that. So that also played into my decision. And yeah. But for those of you who were following, Matt Hansen, we've had on the podcast before, a good friend. He won Toughest Mudder Midwest last year. He got 110 miles. So I was super excited about that because he is I joke that he always comes up just shy of 100 miles at World's Toughest. I think he's got 95, 3 times or something. He's been in the top 5, 3 times. So I was really excited to see him win. And, I like seeing obstacle course racers win, even though that was primarily a running event. And I was kind of expecting some random runner to show up and just kind of blow the doors off because they can run forever and they don't have to do much upper body. So, yeah, looking forward to getting back out to actual World's Toughest Mudder next year. Supposed to be in Laughlin, Nevada. So it's about an hour and a half south of Las Vegas. Could be really warm. So we can start the hashtag no wetsuits needed again. until a sandstorm comes through and ruins everyone's dreams there. But yeah, it should be interesting. It's like right in the corner, like right at the tip of Nevada, so it's like almost in Arizona. So yeah, we'll see. All right, I think that's about. Oh, the other thing the other thing for World's Toughest, my daughter was actually sick on the Monday before or Sunday before, so she was throwing up. And I think I had whatever she had. I didn't throw up on Monday, but I had like night sweats, and I thought it was the altitude, but I think in hindsight, I think it was like a stomach virus but I think that passed beforehand. I think that passed through my body. So
Yeah.
I won't give you the details of that, but I feel fairly confident that left my system.
That's good.
All right, let's jump into the last part of the podcast. So, like I said, JRen, you're a contractor, strength and conditioning coach for the United States Army. So tell us what the Army PT test has been for the last 40 years first.
So, yeah, last 40 years, you had the Army, let's see, ACFT, or no, I'm getting APFT. Yep, yeah. APFT. I've already switched in my brain. So, Army physical fitness test. So, you had 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run, which, going back looking at it in the history of it, when it was adopted in the 80s. I want to say actually in 1980, but adopted in the early 80s, and was at Army's just going co-ed at that point. So females are coming in, trying to find a good standard of how to judge that. It's a peacetime Army as well, and lo and behold, jazzercise and aerobics are super popular in the fitness world at that time. So the Army comes up with this really easy, really cheap, really fast way to measure their fitness with, like I said, push-ups, sit-ups, run, not having to do a whole lot. And yeah, that just moves forward. And now that carried through up until, and there's been talks of changing the PT test since I've been tracking it in the early 2000s. So they've had a number of different.
So there's an Army newspaper called the Army Times, and it is like the tabloid. It's like the Army tabloids. So they rotate through, your new PT test, your new uniform, and they rotate between fitness uniform, dress uniform, and camouflage uniform, and then your new rifle and your new handgun. Like, they publish one of those as the cover page at least once a year. All those. So the new Army PT test has been coming, I mean, forever, right? As long as the Army Times has been pushing out that propaganda, we've been talking about it. So tell us, the old PT test. So 2 minutes of push-ups, you had a 10-minute break minimum. 2 minutes of sit-ups, you had a 10-minute break minimum, and then 2-mile run into the test. So Take us through what the new ACFT looks like. Army Combat Fitness Test. I don't even know what it stands for.
Yeah, ACFT, okay. Army Combat Fitness Test. So first event is a 3-rep max deadlift. And one thing I do like about this is there's no longer male and female standards. The Army is now open that anybody can do any job. So women can come into combat arms, infantry, Rangers, all that fun stuff where they'll get the bad guy. And so because of that, they're now being judged on the same standard. If you want to do the same job, you need to be able to do the same job and meet those same standards. So that's how it's all being graded across the board. And the way that it's working is different jobs based on their physicality have different standards. So you have a gold, silver, black. Why gold is the bottom, I don't know, but it is. So gold standard is your lowest physicality. Silver standard is your medium physicality. And then black standard are your go get the bad guy type.
Well, this is 2020, so we can't do low, medium, and high standard. We have to be kinder and gentler. So that's why we use colors. Go ahead.
Exactly. So like I said, deadlift is first. Then we have the sprint, drag, carry. I want to say that I might get these mixed up in order. You also have the 10 minutes in between minimum, but there is much longer than that. So deadlift into the sprint drag carry, which is effectively a 250-meter shuttle, 25 yards down, 25 yards back. You sprint down and back, make sure to touch the line. Then you sprint drag. Then you drag a 90-pound sled backwards. So you're just backpedaling down, backpedal, back. And then the one that's fun to watch is right after that, especially because no one in the Army does legs. And you have a bunch of these like small little chicken leg guys that just burn their quads out on the drag. Then they have to side shuffle. So basically, like if you played basketball, that just defensive slide sideways. But since their quads are dead, they can't hold themselves up. So it's just like they just fall all over themselves for the first 4 or 5 steps until they like get a little bit of bearing back. Do that down and back. Then they pick up two 40-pound kettlebells to simulate ammo cans, carry those down and back, have to set them down gently, just basically so they don't fall over, because that's the rule. And then as soon as you set those down, sprint down and back again. That is fun to watch because it just smokes people, because everyone in the Army runs long distance because they've been training, like I said, for 40 years to run 2 miles. And so when you have them actually like sprint for 250 meters, they don't like that. Then they go into the hand release push-ups, which are a little different. I guess they should technically be called a T push-up since they changed it, but they kept the name hand release. So start in the down position, chest on the ground, hands out, just like you're in a T. Then bring your hands in. They do have the funky rule that you're into at least one finger, so the tip of your index finger has to be inside of your shoulder capsule, or at least in line with your shoulder. So if you are a little bit, if you don't have the shoulder mobility, you can't do those wider arm push-ups like they've been used to. So push-up, count those that's a 2-minute test there. And then from there, they go into the leg tuck, which is hard to describe here, but basically holding on to a overhead bar. So about like you're going to do a pull-up, but instead of having both hands facing the same way, you have an opposing grip so that your shoulders are 90 degrees to the bar. And then instead of pulling yourself all the way up, you just have to, as the rule states, with a noticeable but slight bend in the elbow, bring your knees up so that your elbow touches some part of your thigh. And so minimum standard for those is 1. The highest passing minimum standard is 5, and then max on those is 20. And then after that, they get to go run 2 miles again. And this is no joke. Well, rumor, but strength coaches and people kind of in the know where there's no real reason to run 2 miles. I guess normally not something that happens in like training, things like that. We have vehicles. If we are moving for 2 miles, it's usually under load with a ruck. So people in my position before me had pushed for either like a longer ruck at the end of the test, or just cutting down the test to 1.5 miles. But literally the words that, as the rumor goes, the reason that they couldn't cut it down to 1.5 miles is because the Air Force has a 1.5 mile test, and the Army had to have a longer test in the Air Force. So, that is the 5 category or the 5 event test they have now.
Did we do medicine ball throw? Did I zone out for a second?
The power throw. I apologize. Yes,
my favorite event. Sarcasm. Yes. Sarcasm.
You're so coordinated though. I don't know why you don't love that. So yeah, after the deadlift and before the sprint drag carry is the med ball power throw. And yes, you basically have a 10-pound medicine ball. You are facing one way, and you granny toss the med ball backwards over your head as far as you can.
Okay. So is this a better test of fitness, in your opinion, than the old test, the new one? I'm going to ask a couple of nuanced questions. So answer that one first.
So fitness, just because I'm going to support the test, I say yes.
Okay.
It's measuring more than one thing.
Agreed.
The previous test did a good job of testing endurance, and for some people they like to put they'll weight endurance heavily when they measure fitness, but Yeah, I imagine. I don't want to answer any of your next questions. So yeah,
Yeah.
overall, it is a better measure of fitness. Yes.
Agreed. You're measuring more things. There's a lot more movements. I think it's a better overall test of fitness. Now, next question. Is this a better test for the Army? And this is where I think people are going to be like, oh, that's very nuanced.
Yeah. So I guess it depends on the way you want to look at it. I think it is, because what is going to happen, and I've already seen it both in my job. We have a usually senior NCO. So I'm going to talk a little Army E's, but E7 and above usually. So kind of that middle management and higher. Those guys have been running in the Army for 15 plus years. They're really good at running. So most of them are smaller I shouldn't say smaller individuals, but when you ask them to pick up weight and then do stuff after that, they're not great at recovering. Partly because they're a little bit older, partly because that's a brand new movement to them. And so here they are at 30 plus years old, some of them 40 plus years old, now all of a sudden having to learn how to trap bar deadlift. Now they have to learn how to move explosively, even though it's only throwing 10 pounds, but now they have to throw this implement back behind them. And they're part of the 80% of the Army that never played sports. So moving multiple body segments at one time isn't super easy. And so there is this fear, in my opinion, unfounded, because the gold standard, that low standard to pass, is so low.
It's really low.
So low that no one should really be afraid of any part of this test. But so I do think it is a good test for the Army. It will just take a couple cycles of turnover for it to catch on and for it to become the norm, so to speak.
Gotcha. So here's where I'm going to disagree with you. And I know we've talked about this before, so you knew this was coming.
Right.
The benefit of the old test was you could do it anywhere at any time, right? Like I need zero equipment. If you're on a base in the middle of Iraq, like if you have a treadmill or a compound that is big enough to physically run around, you can do the old PT test. The new one is very, very equipment intensive, right? I need a trap bar, a hex bar deadlift bar. I need weights. I need a medicine ball. I need this sled dragging implement. And you mentioned water cans or jerry cans. We were using kettlebells where I work. You need a bar to do the leg tucks. And then on top of that, you need the 2 mile run. And then you need tape measure, right? It's very equipment intensive. Yes. And for pushing through large numbers of people, it is not very efficient. It takes longer. It takes more personnel grading. So, the Army is not always about the best solution or for some of these things. A lot of times it's about, a good enough solution for pushing through lots of people, right? That's why we have, generic health standards when you enter the Army. And then, sometimes you can get waivers for stuff, but there's kind of like a general rule of, this gets us like pretty close to the answer we're looking for, and then we'll worry about stuff on the other side.
Right.
So I'm not a huge fan of the test. I think it's very costly and equipment intensive, and it takes a long time. But but I do think it's a better test of fitness. And the other thing I'm going to disagree with you on is the run. I think, obviously not, maybe not surprising, right? But
right.
People in Iraq, people would always be like, "Hey, sir, why do I have to run 2 miles if all I'm doing is, when we get shot at, all I do is run 10 yards into, and get behind a Humvee or get behind a wall, and then, run 10 yards into a house to raid it," right?
Right.
The one caveat I'll say there is, prior to someone shooting at you, we've been walking around for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. So your ability to sprint is actually your endurance, and then like a shot of adrenaline when someone shoots at you. So I think that, show me a guy that can run 2 miles fast that can't do a shuttle run fast. And I think there are plenty of guys who can do a shuttle run fast but can't run 2 miles. I don't think there's many guys who can run 2 miles fast that can't do a shuttle run fast. That's where I'm at.
Fair. But with that, so that's where we would almost prefer the ruck. Like put people under load for time. Like you said, you've been walking, and it's not just like, and as some people may know, some people may not, like when you're walking around in, that foreign environment, you're not just walking around in, your uniform and pants and boots and whatever, wearing, you've got body armor, you may or may not have a pack, you've got full combat load of ammo. That stuff isn't light.
Yeah,
So
you're carrying 50 pounds at
yeah, at
least, right?
least.
Yeah. And
So that's how we would prefer. Go
yeah,
ahead.
you got your helmet on, you got your weapon, you got optics on your weapon, you have your ammo, your radio, your night vision goggles. A lot of times you'll have water on you. Obviously, the body armor has plates in it, and then you add all this, and then you add clothing that is specifically not super breathable, right? Like I'm not wearing
Right.
shorts and a t-shirt. I'm wearing, it's 115 degrees, and I'm wearing long sleeves, gloves, long pants, and helmet and eye protection. So just my mouth is exposed to the cool air, which is not cool. And yeah, so it's not easy to vent heat.
Right.
They used to, so the rumor was that what our Iraqi counterparts told us was that the American soldiers were all on drugs or some sort of special drug that allowed them to walk around with all that weight and that heat, because it shouldn't be possible. That's what they used to tell us.
Right. Yeah. So that's why we would prefer, and we in our programming for the soldiers now implement a lot of rucking, because one thing that modern younger soldiers are really good at is giving just enough effort to get by. So, and I say that we're obviously still a good army, so don't take it the wrong way, anybody. But like in PT, because they haven't had a athletics background, or they've just haven't been pushed as kids very much, or as young adults, they're once they find that pace. So a lot of soldiers, because they're not used to running or physical activity training, their 2-mile pace is the same as their 5-mile pace, which isn't that much slower than a longer than 5-mile pace. Whereas if we tell them, all right, now we're going to go ruck under load, now we can kind of, and if you're working up to the 12-mile standard, you have to do that in under 4 hours with 35 pounds on your back. It kind of forces a little bit of intensity out of them. And then we can also, kind of bring that down. Like, you had to work hard with this. Now let's push the pace on some of our runs and get that conditioning in that way. So, but yeah, we would much rather see a longer ruck at the end of the test than a 2-mile or anything like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that makes sense. That makes sense. And on a side note, I've never heard that 4 hours. Every unit I've been in is 12 miles, 3 hours, 12 miles under 3 hours, and usually 50 pounds dry. That's what I'm usually told in the unit side.
There's your EIB.
Yeah, that's what I'm using. I guess that the 35 and 4 is the conventional support stuff.
Yeah, that is the just regular. I'm in the Army. I have to go on a 12-mile ruck. Yeah, that is
interesting. Learn something new every day.
Yeah.
So, and if anyone wants to try any of these physical fitness tests, we'll try to throw some links and some grading criteria. The old one was age and gender based, and then the new one is, like we were saying, is MOS. They're your job based, and you can kind of see how you stack up against that. I'd say if you're going to try to take the old one for fun, watch a couple of videos of what the proper standard looks like, because push-ups are very, you're supposed to break the plane, right? Your upper arm is supposed to be parallel or below to the ground, and you're supposed to lock out at the top. So, a lot of people, when they enter the Army, their push-up form is terrible because they're not going all the way up or all the way down. And the same thing with sit-ups, right? They don't go all the way up or all the way down. So running's pretty self-explanatory. But yeah, that's a quick rundown. And we'll see. It's still being phased in, and they're still kind of tuning stuff. I've taken one practice one. The medicine ball throw was awkward, and I don't believe it simulates anything that you do in combat. Evan's general opinion is a bunch of personal trainers came up with a good test of fitness and then bought stock in hex bars, medicine balls, and sled drags. And they are now very wealthy. The Army bought so much of that equipment. It is insane. I mean, it's literally, it's so insane. So, I think, OCR athletes will, if you want to give this a test, it's a good workout, and it's a good way to test your fitness. And then with the new test, basically, you can't use wrist straps or weight belts or anything like that. It's basically a as you are type stuff.
Yeah, I do like some of the standards for the grading of the deadlift, where they make sure that, and this one's obvious, but your hips can't come above your shoulders for the movement, but also like as you're well aware, like on squat and deadlift form, especially trap bar deadlift, if someone's knees kind of jump in and they're not activating their glutes and stuff like that, like that's a no rep. That doesn't count, and they can be terminated from the event on that one if they keep messing up, or be sent to the back of the line to try again. So I do like some of the standards they have put on the deadlift, especially.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of deadlifts. I think it's like one of my favorite movements, and it's, I think if someone asked me if I could only do one strength exercise, that, what would it be? And it's deadlifts, right? Because you're just engaging a lot of your body. And now that it's the off season, you can. I'm going to get back to deadlifting, because I usually don't deadlift much during the year because it takes a lot out of my running. So good power or good strength movement there, and yeah, excited to get back to deadlifting. Fun stuff. All right. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
I think we've covered most of it. On a shameless self-plug, JRen is open to athletes, so find me on Facebook, Instagram, and yeah, those are the only two.
Gotcha. Yeah, JRen Fitness. You can find him on there. And do you want to let's do tell us something people would be surprised to know about you. You got anything good?
When I'm listening in the car, I always have them planned out, and I wasn't even. Oh, you caught me off guard. Let's see. Something people may not know. I'm expecting first child any day.
That is exciting. So Jared almost delayed the podcast because he's like, my wife might be in labor, but she's not yet. So by the time this airs, you'll probably have a little one.
Probably.
That'll be super exciting.
Have you watched the new Mandalorian yet? Let's go down that route if you haven't talked about that yet.
I have not watched the new Mandalorian. I watched the first season. It was amazing.
It was.
I need to start the second season. The one show I did start watching, I don't watch too much TV, was Cobra Kai. Have you seen that?
I know it's YouTube based, right? But I have not watched it.
So it's now on Netflix. It is so good, right? Like there's so many throwbacks to the original Karate Kid. There's so many references. They do flashbacks. They do all these 80s jokes that I know younger kids are watching it, and it's going right over their head. It's really, really good. I can't get enough of it. Highly recommend Cobra Kai. And they do a really good job of just kind of showing the other side of the story. I don't know if you've seen that. You ever seen that YouTube video that tries to point out that Danny LaRusso, Ralph Macchio is the bad guy, and Johnny Lawrence is the good guy?
Yeah.
So at one point they actually like go through that, and then make sure season 1, 2 is out on Netflix, 3 is coming out. The end of season 2 has a fight scene that I would honestly put up against any other fight scene in popular media. Like it's that good, and it's like one continuous unbroken shot where they're going from fight to fight, and the camera's kind of swiveling around, and there's fighting in the background. It's really, really good. All right, so since we mentioned Karate Kid, my favorite song growing up was, I don't even know the proper name of it, Glory of Love. You know what I'm talking about? We did it all for, I'm not going to sing it, but
okay. Yeah, I think I got it, yeah.
Like a knight in shining armor from a long time ago. Right?
Yeah.
That was my favorite song growing up from the Karate Kid 2 soundtrack.
Nice.
So, and I was a couple years ago, was it back in 2004? I guess that's more than a couple years ago. I forgot a band did a cover of it that was really good, and it went popular again. But
nice. Yeah. On that, actual thing people may not know or unexpected. On that same line, as a little kid, my favorite song was Danger Zone from Top Gun. Like, loved that song.
Good choice.
Would put the tape in the VCR just to listen to the song.
Nice. All right, we're going to get going. If you haven't picked up a copy of my biography, Ultra-OCR Man, Special Forces Soldier to Record-Setting Obstacle Course Racer, it's on Audible. Download that. I was expecting to sell more Audible versions, but I'm actually selling more hard copy books and digital books than I am Audible, which is surprising because I figured people like audio content. But other than that, all my other books are now on Amazon, or you can buy them hard copy on Amazon or paperback. They're actually they're both in paperback off my website or off Amazon, and then digital also on Amazon. And then finally, Blegmets, we have light and extreme still. Small and large, I think we're down to like 6 or 7 pairs of small and large lights, and no reorder planned until mid 2021. So for those of you who are looking for Christmas presents for your loved ones or OCR athletes, pick those up sooner rather than later. So you make sure you get the right size you want. Otherwise, you're going to have to order them from Australia, and it's like $30 shipping. All right, last, any final shout outs before we let you go, Jared?
Nope, I think I'm good.
All right, we're going to take off. Everyone have a good night, and keep training. Try to stay motivated, and we'll be back on the race course in 2021. All right, catch you later.
Bye.